Hello, everyone. This is the Traditionalist. Now, first of all, I know probably a lot of you are thinking, where have you been? And that's a fair question. I don't think I've uploaded anything for like a year and a half. But the main reason I haven't been doing that is because I've been mainly focusing on my other channel, Micah History, which is my history channel. Now, if you haven't checked that out, you should. You should go and subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. But essentially, because I'm focusing on that and I'm at university and there's really not that much time for me to make videos in general, I decided to just focus on that one channel. But you know what? I decided now is as good as ever to finally come back. The school year is coming to an end, and so might as well make some content here, because I have not actually forgotten about this channel. So, with all that out of the way, today we are going to be covering CANDACE Owens getting fired. So, for those of you who may not know already, CANDACE Owens is a political pundit and conservative commentator who talks about different social issues, usually stuff going on in the United States. So, she is someone who was hired by the company known as the Daily Wire. And that is a company co-founded by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring. So essentially they brought her on about 3 years ago, and things were going pretty well. I mean, I watched her from the very beginning. I watched her since the first episode all the way until the last episode. But beneath this collaboration, a lot of tension was simmering. So what was going on? Well, essentially the problem, to sum it up, is that CANDACE Owens has been accused of being anti-Semitic. But is it really true? Well, this video will attempt to answer that question. But where did this entire accusation even start? Well, it all really traces back to a speech that CANDACE Owens gave when she was discussing nationalism. Now, keep in mind, at the time, this is not really a big controversy, but it did set off a chain of events. And so I will let you listen to the speech yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets, the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. He was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I think that it's okay. It's important to retain your country's identity and to make sure that what's happening here, which I think is incredibly worrisome in terms of the decrease in the birth rate that we're seeing in the UK, is what you kind of want to avoid. So I don't have I have no problems with nationalism. It's globalism that I try to avoid.
There you have it. I have no issues with nationalism. There's no person that can watch that clip and somehow believe that I was saying it's totally okay to Holocaust the Jews. I didn't even mention the word Holocaust. I didn't mention the word Jews. Truly was answering a question about whether or not we should embrace the word nationalism, but that didn't matter. Behind them, BuzzFeed News, CANDACE Owens. If Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. Again, no context giving to that quotation, so you can imagine the firestorm that was caused. And Mediaite, CANDACE Owens, Hitler's nationalism was actually fine. It was his globalism that was a problem. You can already see what they were trying to do. And then you had Jewish organizations that issued very strong statements against them, among them the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Here is a tweet from them when this was going viral back on February 8th, 2019. They wrote, "Scope and depth of CANDACE Owens' lack of knowledge of basic history is appalling and frightening. Hitler's program to make Germany great was based on race and anti-Semitism." Also, of course, the ADL instantly jumped on this. They retweeted, first and foremost, John Whitehouse, so they helped to make this video go viral. And then they wrote this in response: "CANDACE Owens bizarrely claims Hitler went wrong only when he meddled in other countries. Hitler's murderous crimes against Jews and others were horrific, regardless of whether they occurred across Europe or in Germany alone. Hitler wasn't a globalist, but a genocidal dictator. So you see what they're doing here. They're just engaging in the libel and the slander. They're trying to color people's opinions before they've actually heard or understood the context of what I was saying. And let me tell you guys something. It worked.
So what is it that I think about all this? Well, I do actually disagree with Candace's statement, but not probably for the reason that you might suspect, and definitely not for the reason that these organizations that are condemning her are. I just think that invading other countries does not make you not a nationalist, and those don't make you a globalist, because what I think she tried to say there is that Hitler was an imperialist, which he was, but he was also a nationalist, because a nationalist is someone who wants to put their nation above all others. And so conquering other countries doesn't mean that you are not a nationalist, because you can still put your nation above other nations, and you can express that through military violence and military dominance. So therefore, I disagree with her statement, but obviously the reaction is completely disingenuous. She was not saying that this was Hitler's only problem. She just said that him being a nationalist was not a problem. It was the fact that he was invading other countries that was the problem. And she also isn't wrong that if Hitler actually had just wanted to fix Germany and whatever, that wouldn't have been a problem, right? Because just because Hitler did other bad things doesn't mean that him trying to fix Germany is also bad. The problem, right, is his, extreme racism and, the many atrocities he'd end up committing. So, of course, you can't expect the media to actually be truthful about any of this, but let's continue and see what other controversies were going on. Now, these Hitler comments were just the beginning of the problem, because I think much more importantly, and I think where things really started to go awry, was when she condemned a U.S. congressman, I believe, for genocidal statements. Because apparently, genocide isn't wrong anymore. Take a listen.
But on this day, he was focused on something that Brian Mast, a congressman, had said on the floor. Ishar Ali tweeted, "This is absolutely sick stuff from Rep. Brian Mast, and if there's any decency left in Congress, a resolution will be passed to condemn his remarks, and he'll be removed from the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm not naive enough to think he'd resign." So I saw this tweet, and then I clicked to see what Brian Mast said, and I was equally as disgusted. Here is what Brian Mast said.
As a whole, I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
I hope that enrages you, because what he's basically saying is there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian life. And basically, I believe, was laying the groundwork for genocide. That's genocidal language to say about any group of people. If I say there's no such thing as an innocent Iraqi, it doesn't matter who you're talking about, that is genocidal language. And so I retweeted this, and I said, yeah, this was disgusting, utterly dehumanizing. Of course, there are innocent civilians on either side of every conflict, and we should not forget that. This is shameful, inhumane rhetoric. I shortly followed up that retweet with a blanket statement: no government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide ever. There was no justification for a genocide. I can't believe this even needs to be said or is even considered the least bit controversial to state. Of course, what Brian Mast said was wrong. When I tweeted that second tweet, people thought that I was talking about Israel, or some people thought I was talking about Israel. They were so far in the trenches, they thought that I was making a statement that Israel is committing a genocide, when in reality I was saying that people like Brian Mast need to cool it with their language. I get something bad has happened, but you can't say stuff like this ever. And so what happened was people who were formerly friends of mine, like Dave Rubin, began reading into it, began doing shows, just pretending, straight up pretending that I made a statement about the Israeli government when in fact I hadn't. I just showed you the proof that I had not. I liked Yashar's tweet. I retweeted it. I was obviously speaking about Brian Mast, but it didn't matter. Because what I learned, and what I think a lot of people are learning, and especially on the heels of my discussion with Rabbi Barclay, is that even if what you said was something else, how some people feel should be prioritized. So even though I was talking about Brian Mast, and I was proven right in talking about Brian Mast, I was still at fault. I needed to understand that I was still wrong because of how other people felt, that the timing of my tweet wasn't right. It wasn't the right time to say that genocide is always wrong. There's a time and a place for that, and that was not it.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with what she said here. To say that there are no innocent Palestinians is completely insane. Now I know some of you will inevitably be asking, oh, what side do you support? You must be pro-Palestine. I'm not pro-Palestine. I'm not pro-Israel. I condemn both of them, and they both suck for different reasons. I can actually probably make another video at some point about my opinions on it, but I don't support either side in this war. But to get back to this point, right? To say that they're out of, 2-3 million people in that area, that not even one of them is innocent, is insane genocidal language. So she had every right to condemn him. And also his other analogy saying there were no innocent Nazi civilians. I mean, first of all, okay, not like what all 80 million Germans were Nazis. That's stupid. But yeah, not all of them were guilty of the Nazi war crimes. And so to say there were no innocent Germans is insane. Like, what about the Germans who literally went out of their way to assassinate Hitler? Were they also not, were they also not innocent? It seems pretty insane to me to say something like that. And then, of course, it doesn't really surprise me to see how this comment triggered people, especially, pro-Israeli people like Dave Rubin, who's Jewish. It doesn't really surprise me because oftentimes they will defend their people no matter what. And so to criticize them at all is wrong. And so even if they committed genocide, it's still okay. So once again, doesn't surprise me. But let's keep going. Now, after all the backlash that came from this, she made another video commenting on their reaction to her original comments concerning Brian Mast.
When a bunch of innocent Israelis were murdered and killed in horrific acts. And genuinely, I am sad when a bunch of innocent Palestinians, and yes, they do exist, Brian Mast, are now being made to endure bombing and all sorts of other horrific things that we are all seeing on Twitter. That is my crime. Everybody can see that. It's ridiculous to pretend that it's anything else.
Now, already, even just potentially implying that Israel was involved in a genocide and that genocides are bad was already a big no-no that Candace was not allowed to say, because genocide is wrong if it's done to them, but not by them. But to make things even worse, she started calling out how much American politicians bootlick for Israel. And that was also not very good. So Candace Owens, during the Republican primaries or whatever the thing is called where they choose their candidates, she went really hard on Nikki Haley. And I saw all her videos on it, and so for the most part, she's mainly criticizing Nikki Haley for being sort of your average politician, having no real opinions, just being paid to say whatever her handlers tell her to do, refusing to answer questions that were not already prepared, and being generally pretty unintelligent. But the real problem that she pointed out with Nikki Haley was how much she supported Israel. I mean, I remember she said something ridiculous that Israel doesn't need America, America needs Israel. By any objective metric, America does not need Israel for anything, right? Even if you support Israel, Israel is not crucial for any aspect of American life. Like, Israel needs America somewhat. I don't know if I'd say necessarily Israel needs America, period, but they do need them somewhat to maintain their current position. But to say America needs Israel is ridiculous. And then the point that she was trying to make with that is, therefore, we should give more money to Israel. And keep in mind, today I actually just saw this graph, which is pretty interesting, which shows the top five major recipients of U.S. aid since World War II. And Israel was number one. And when you think about it, what has Israel given the U.S. in return? I mean, I used to watch these people like PragerU and whatever, and they'll talk about it and they'll say, oh, well, they are like the first line of defense against America's enemies. It's like Palestine, Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, none of these countries threaten the U.S., right? So the return on investment is nothing. And let's just be honest about that. But anyways, this is what Candace said.
I am here today to endorse Nikki Haley for president of Israel. I think she's earned that. I think Bibi Netanyahu is going through a very bad time right now. Support for Israel has virtually collapsed socially. If you're paying attention to the trends and you're paying attention to what people are watching, you're paying attention to the protests. And the one person that I think is capable of getting it back is Nikki Haley, with enough money from foreign interest lobbies. So there it is, guys. I'm endorsing Nikki Haley, president of Israel.
Well, this statement definitely crossed the line, and it got Ben Shapiro so outraged that he decided to diss on her. But he decided not to do this in public. He went to a private event, not realizing he was being recorded, and started bashing on his colleague. Now, you would think that someone like him, right, especially someone who like co-owns the company or whatever, that, he would come and talk to her in private. I mean, these people are always talking about like free speech and open debate. So you'd think they'd have some sort of discussion, but instead he goes to, some private event and then starts basically gossiping and trash talking about his own employee.
And then the question was about CANDACE Owens. I think her behavior during this has been disgraceful. Without a doubt. I can't close that. Yeah, and she still works for my company. I think she's been absolutely disgraceful. I think that her faux sophistication on these particular issues has been ridiculous. It's not faux sophistication, it's ridiculous. Everybody can see the moves that she's making and the things that she's saying, and I find them disreputable.
Oh yeah, because condemning genocide is totally disgraceful behavior according to him. Now, even if maybe some of the other stuff he, might find more disgraceful, or, maybe it's not that genocide comment, maybe it's the Nikki Haley stuff. Or, maybe it's saying that there are innocent Palestinians. In any case, none of these are disgraceful. I'm thinking maybe the worst thing she said was the Nikki Haley thing, but, that was clearly meant as a joke. And so he shouldn't be so uptight about it. But really, nothing she said so far has actually been disgraceful. I think he's just angry that she refuses to support his cause. And so he decides to try to not even solve the problem, but basically, rant about her in a very disgraceful way. And then you see, of course, all these morons, yeah, all cheering for him. That's actual disgraceful behavior. Interestingly enough, Candace didn't even get informed of this until the internet broke the story, because, as I said, someone was recording this in secret. And so she then went to have an interview with Tucker Carlson, who is not liked by the Daily Wire because he also isn't pro-Israel. And this is what they had to say.
Quote, absolutely disgraceful, particularly a coworker, seems like a pretty big step. And I really don't know the background here. What is that about?
There isn't much of a background. I saw the video when everybody else saw it when I woke up.
No one warned you about it.
Nobody warned me about it. It looks like maybe he didn't know he was being recorded. It looks like it was some sort of a private event. I got no clarity on the issue that he was particularly speaking on. And in what was said, I can't respond to it beyond what he's saying because it's just ad hominem attacks. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's not, we disagree, or
yeah.
I don't think she's correct, or maybe she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can't respond to it on a level of intellect because there's nothing that he has expressed at least in that short clip, that he fundamentally disagrees with in terms of what I said. But I will say that I'm not going to respond with the same ad hominem attacks. Yes. I don't think it helps further discussion. And if that was me that was caught on a video saying that about colleagues that I work with, I would be embarrassed. So I think that the video speaks more to Ben's character than it speaks to mine.
Has he texted you to apologize or explain or anything?
No, nothing. I haven't heard a single word. It just was sort of something that he said. And you know what? Ben and I have many disagreements, so I don't think that that's particularly something that's interesting. We disagreed on the COVID vaccine. We disagree on Ukraine and Russia. He has taken virtually every stance that has been the opposite of mine on every issue over the last 5 years. So I don't think that that's particularly
on the COVID
remarkable.
Vaccine. Really, I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
To be honest, this is hardly surprising behavior. I'm not even very surprised to find out he didn't apologize. He didn't really discuss the situation. He just attacks her like this in public, or well, not intentionally anyways, but without addressing it directly to her. And also, the last part sort of stood out to me. He also has different positions from her on COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war, because as much as Ben Shapiro plays the anti-establishment thing, he's pretty pro-establishment on most issues. I mean, the Russia-Ukraine war, which, all our elites and all the establishment are pushing for, he's totally for that, shilling for Ukraine. And then there's the COVID stuff too, where he's promoting the vaccine and all of that stuff. So it kind of makes sense, because essentially Candace and Ben don't share the same ideology. Ben is a neoconservative, and Candace is a MAGA Republican, so sort of an America First isolationist. So yeah, this is hardly surprising to see. From there, things only escalated, and so Candace Owens wrote this tweet where she says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Now, this comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And of course, Candace here is just claiming, just quoting scripture. But it is obvious that this is targeted towards the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. And Ben Shapiro obviously correctly interpreted it that way. And he responded by saying, "Candace, if you feel that taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means quit." And so it's actually a pretty smart move on her part, because she is just kind of exposing his emotional immaturity, his inability to handle criticism. And so I think she responded to that by saying, "You've been acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks now, and we have all had to sit back and allow it, and have all tried to exercise exceeding understanding for your raw emotion. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and read yourself into it. I will not tolerate it." Yeah, so I will say Candace is sort of being disingenuous by saying that that was not really targeted. It is kind of obvious that that tweet was sort of targeted towards him, because otherwise why just randomly start quoting that verse? But nevertheless, though, she was correct. I mean, I used to watch Ben Shapiro like literally every day. And the moment this October 7th thing happened, and then everything since then, he's becoming super emotional. He's all like free speech, but he was happy that pro-Palestinian protesters were being banned in France. So yeah, and I'm sure it was the same on set as well, so I completely understand what she said.